Today, we welcome Holly Stokes to the broadcast Your Brilliance Summit. I'm here with Holly, a 3 times author, master NLP coach and trainer, a hypnosis trainer who has worked with thousands of clients to help them rewire their brain out of the old habits, patterns, and self-sabotage into positive results. She created a lighter you hypnosis and weight loss system and has been quoted by Shape Magazine, Active Times, and Chicago Tribune. She keeps a thriving practice and co-owns the Life Harmony Wellness Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. A little bit of a mouthful there, but
yeah.
Clearly, Holly, you are such a valuable asset to this community. Holly, would you mind first telling us in your own words, what is the number one thing that you think gets in the way of hypnotists and healers converting prospects into clients? Because that's the most common complaint I think that we hear as we're getting around.
So I think there's actually a whole bunch of things that go into that process. So I would say kind of the number one way that people don't trip up, or that people trip up with that, is not having a map of what the client is going through in their experience with you as the hypnotist, the expert, the healer. So, and it kind of, I would suggest getting a white blank sheet of paper and recognize the steps along the way, because your marketing is how you get your clients to you. But part of your conversion is what are their brain habits and associations that they're making with you. So this goes to, how do you answer the phone? How are you getting referred? How are you responding to that referral? Where are you meeting them? I have an office. I've had an office for a long time, and I know a lot of things are going online. So part of their experience too is, what is your environment that you're taking them through? And even if you are seeing people online, you want your space to look professional. You want your environment to be professional. All of this is going into those memory files of your client. So when you walk them through the process of, the education about hypnosis or your modality, and how it works for them, and how they can, what they have to help their brain change or shift along the way, then those are your leverage points as you're educating them. So it is, and then of course there is the sales conversation and what comes through in that. But I suggest mapping it out, blank sheet of paper, go through step 1, step 2, really recognize it as a whole process in how your clients are perceiving you. And all of that goes into whether they're ready or not to move forward with a program.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is like, we kind of need to start paying attention to the things that we're not paying attention to, right? Like we get so hung up on what's the right thing to say, or what's the right question to ask, or the perfect sales script, right? Like how many of us have a script and we just jump on? And I've even actually had clients tell me they have a script and they just go down it. And I'm just like, is it like a checklist? Because if it sounds like you're going down a checklist, your client's going to feel like a checklist.
Right.
Yeah. So what are some of those things that we need to pay attention to? I heard you say like our backgrounds, like making sure it looks professional. Like what are maybe like 2 or 3 other things that we really pay attention to that is really, really kind of subcommunicates a lot of things to our clients?
Yeah, so one is just how you dress. Are you dressing professionally? Are you dressing? I'm a fan of dressing up. So, business casual. Because if you're showing up in jeans and a t-shirt, clients are getting this impression, maybe you're more like a personal trainer. Maybe you're not as, maybe you're not as professional, or not taking it as seriously. This, again, is part of those mental maps that go into their perception of you. So if we want to be supported with professional fees, if we want to be seen as the expert in our field, in our environments, we also want to look that part for people. Part of this also has to do with your demographics. So that's even before people come to the office. Who are you looking for that is going to be the right fit for you, right?
Yeah.
So really kind of getting clear about mapping out their whole experience. I also remember talking with one hypnotist, and he's like, I don't need music to hypnotize people. I don't use music. People don't need it. I'm a good hypnotist. And I'm like, you know what? Your client session is not about you. It's about your client.
Yeah.
Really making them the center. You are creating a safe space where people are saying things that maybe they haven't told anybody. These places where they're carrying these wounds and these hurts. And your environment that you create is at an unconscious level, helping them to know whether or not they're safe in that space.
Mhm.
And it comes through in your environment, how you show up. It comes through in your professionalism. It also comes through in your body language, whether you recognize it or not.
This is a
All of
big
these
deal.
minor cues. What's that? Sorry.
I was like, this is a big deal. I think if you're getting a stream of objections, it's time to look at, like you said, like our body language, or even in our voice. Like, are we speaking with a lot of doubt, or are we showing up like, oh, hang on, let me find, like
Right.
shuffling, not ready for a yes or for even a no. It's like we're surprised when
Right.
we get objections and we're not ready to handle them.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's super important. I'm so glad, and I'm so glad you brought up the sort of like when you were talking about whether our business is about us or about them. And I think it's very evident when your business is all about you versus all about your client. Like, it shows up in your copy, it shows up again in your voice and the words you say, and on your sales calls. Like, let's be honest, like if you're getting like upset because you got an objection, like what does that tell you about you? Why take that personally when they barely know you? Probably.
Yeah. And along with kind of mapping out your process, recognize your comfort level with each of those steps. How you answer the phone, how you book your session. Are you conveying that sense of ease? This is a safe space. This is, I know what I'm doing here. Especially new hypnotists need to practice quite a bit till they get that sense of, I feel confident with my clients. Yeah.
I say, think about it. If you're on the other end of that, what would you need to feel or think to invest like whatever you're charging? If you're charging like premium, we're talking like 6,000 and above for programs, like how would you want to feel? Like, would you want to feel like a checklist or would you,
Right.
do you want to feel seen and heard and valued? And, while we're on this topic, Holly, I would love to, to hear about what are some of maybe the most common mistakes you see holistic healers and hypnotists make when they're just getting into sales and enrollment conversations. Are there maybe like 2 or 3 things that really stick out when we go through these conversations and then all of a sudden we get an objection and we don't know why?
So yes, like what's going on, what are the mistakes they're making, and what are those things that are creating objections? Objections are really the client doesn't recognize the value. So, and just like we talked about, your business is not about you, it's about your clients, right? So anytime we're asking them for money, we need to be demonstrating, showing the value, helping them recognize how it's going to work for them, why they need this. And especially with hypnosis, if you're selling a program and a package, which I highly recommend you do, rather than chasing down onesie twosie sessions, you're going to want to outline why they need that many sessions or what you're going to accomplish within that window of time in that framework. So I would say the things that kind of trip people up are not being comfortable with money. So if you have mental blocks about money, I know there's a lot of like messages like you shouldn't charge for spiritual work. well, if hugs could fill my gas tank, I'd be out there the whole time. But so really recognize, kind of like as we said, map out that process. How do you feel about each of those steps? Do you feel comfortable inviting people to your space? Do you feel comfortable taking them through the process of hypnosis or your modality? And do you feel comfortable asking them for money? If you're not feeling comfortable, it's showing you your unconscious mind likely has some blocks or some objections to that as well. So if people are saying no's, or you're getting a string of no's, one, you could be attracting clients that are kind of poverty mindset, and so they're not willing to make this investment in themselves. But likely part of it is you're not demonstrating the benefits. And we can do that in different ways. We can do that through social proof, testimonials, but even just mapping out, hey, we're going to help change these stress patterns, and then we're going to change this craving, this sabotage, this motivation. And it's all about them. What do they want? You, as a practitioner, might have a separate agenda, because often we hear people coming in, I just want to do weight loss. But we know as a practitioner, well, you really need X, Y, Z until you can support healthy lifestyle changes. So benefits, benefits, benefits is what I would say. And also doing your own personal work, recognizing, okay, I'm not feeling 100% congruent with this. So where am I kind of blocking that energy, or where am I not 100% online with getting paid what I'm asking for?
Yeah. I think often we are, and I know we hear this a lot, like we are mirrors of what we attract. But I think we don't really stop and think about, what does that mean if we break it down? Like, I remember me personally, like I used to feel really uncomfortable with clients putting like a program on a credit card. And it was because my credit card situation was not good. But then once I became comfortable with that, like I had cleared up a lot of my own money issues. Like it was just like, hey, why don't, this is an option. Like, well, have you thought about that? Like it was more comfortable to offer that as a solution, even though I don't know their financial situation, but on my side, I felt more comfortable with that. So
yeah. And often along those same lines, often we're assuming things about the client that may not have anything to do with where they are. So, maybe if they're not dressing up, we assume, oh, they don't have the money to invest, but you don't know if they have an inheritance or lots of extra financial resources, or maybe they didn't want to dress up today and they actually have a high paying job, So we don't know what their background is, and not assuming that they can't pay. That's kind of a different conversation. And letting people be responsible for their own finances is one of those factors as well, especially for hypnotist healers.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. Like, for those of you watching, go back and rewind that piece, because I think that is not a road you want to go down, where you're telling your prospective client like what to do with their finances. Like that is not a territory you want to go down, because that will come back to bite you, right? If you influence their decision and now they are in a panic, or for some reason, that I think we want to stay out of there, right, Holly, and say, hey, I can help you with financing on my side, but then that, what you do is completely up to you. Like, your financial situation best. And not to, because I've had that, I don't know if you've had this, Holly, but I've had clients be very open with their financial situation with me for whatever reason, but I'm very careful not to make suggestions on what to do. It's more like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But not like, hey, like, why don't you try this? Why don't you do that? Because that is always that is like not a road you want to go to.
We don't give advice, but we empower people to make their own choices and to recognize their own answers as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, is it, we often hear like, I can't afford it a lot. And Holly, I would love to get your perspective on this. Is it like, what are your thoughts about this objection? I can't afford it, because we often, we end up believing them, or we may even assume that they can't afford it ahead of time. Like, do you find in your own experience, is it that they really can't afford it, or is maybe there's something else going on a little deeper?
Yeah, so this is a good story from one of my friends. She's a chiropractor, and we had this specific conversation. She's like, people come in, I know they need the help, I know they need the work. And this one man in particular said, I just really can't afford it, but he needed, and chiropractic is like 35, this is 10 years ago, so $35, $45 a session, right? But he did need the weekly follow-up. So she gave him a price reduction. And the next week he shows up in a Hummer. So, these ideas, I can't afford it, is all about their priorities. Mm-hmm. What are really their priorities? Now, sometimes you will get clients that truly can't afford it. I'm kind of a soft-hearted kind of perspective on this. Over the years, I've had my own journey about this. But rather than discounting fees, I have created a lot of ways for people to get the content, the information, online courses, CDs, recordings, YouTube channel, that there's a lot of resources available for them. So often I'll give them something to get them started. And then, hey, when things pick up, when you find that next job, go ahead and give me a call then, and we'll review, we'll review what you can afford, or what would be a good starting place for you in the process. So I don't like to leave people hanging, but there's so many resources out there. And part of it too is, how are people prioritizing? Now in our culture, if you have a job, if you have a stable income or environment, people will say, I can't afford it, but they're walking around with $200 shoes and an iPhone. Yeah. So a lot of it's really about priorities.
Yeah. And I think often what happens, and I've seen this in my clients as well, is that they end up sort of caving. They'll end up caving right when they say their price, or even before they say their price. They'll kind of go in their head and be like, oh, should I, shouldn't I? Should I just charge less my normal price, or should I increase my prices? And we're having this dialogue in our heads during the conversation. And, we sort of end up taking on responsibility that's not ours, when we fear they can't afford it, or they might say no, things like that. And maybe some of that comes from feeling guilty about charging for your services. Holly, what message do you have for those hypnotists and healers who, look, if we're here, we know we have something to offer, right? If you're a healer, you're meant to serve. Like, you have something so powerful, and I'm going to assume deep down, it. And we somehow get stuck thinking like we need to be almost like slaves versus service providers. And Holly, I would love to hear what message or tip or some guidance for this group, maybe who's just like, ouch, when they feel like charging or increasing their prices.
Mm-hmm. So like, what tips about that?
Yeah, maybe like a different way to think about charging for services, so we don't have to feel guilty or shameful.
Right. Well, if we really want the profession of hypnosis, and especially like energy healers or healers, to grow in the world and to have that respect, we need to charge those prices that show respect, right? We wouldn't go to a doctor or psychologist and say, oh, well, I can only afford, I know your rates are this, but I can only afford $20. Can you do that? Like, we don't do that. So having professional fees and setting that rate. And also, just when people ask, what are your fees? What are your rate? I like to have that sales conversation first, or really the assessment first, so that people really recognize why they need it. But having that conversation is where you say, this is what it is. If you have a set rate, professional fees are set. There's no like, well, maybe you can do this, or maybe you can do this. You're also giving that air of professionalism to your modality. So part of this is embracing, I am a professional. This is important, valuable work. This has long-term effects. Like the work that you do with your clients doesn't just help to change them. It influences their whole family system. And in that influence of the family system, it influences their neighborhood, their communities. And so it's really powerful work. And we need to come to the profession with that awareness that we are a respectable profession, that we are valuable in the professional field. And what would you expect to pay a professional? So that's a good place to recognize if you're not willing to pay, the same prices that you're asking for, there might be some incongruence there.
Yeah, I love that was a great analogy. Like, do you barter with doctors or psychotherapists or, like people who need you? Do they go and barter with these people? And the answer is no. So why would you be any different?
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So it's time to stop caving. And I heard you say the word respect, which I really think that is key. Like if your client doesn't respect you, and I think one of the fastest ways to losing respect is saying, okay, well, we'll just do it for this price. How about that? Or like, well, for you, I'll give you a discount. Or one of the fastest ways to discredit ourselves is by caving in. And it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Like we cave in because we want the client or the money or whatever, but then
help them. Yeah.
But we end up,
and I've learned this the hard way. The people that I tend to bend over backwards for or reduce their price or fee, those are the ones that are no-shows. They don't show up. They don't care about the session enough to come in. Or, now I have people kind of prepay to come in so that they know, like, my time is valuable. If you decide not to show up, there's a monetary consequence, which also helps people remember better.
Like my coach said that where money goes, attention goes.
Yeah, it's true.
So that, that financial investment is necessary it's really necessary to get your clients results, really.
Well, it's really that commitment from their part. If they're not willing to pay for their own program, for their own, process, and to pay for your expertise and your time, they're not really committed to it. And we don't really want to work with clients who aren't committed to it, right? We want people who are ready to make the changes, ready to dive in, ready to take those steps. And that very first step is whether or not they're going to invest in this challenge with you.
Yeah. Are there maybe like a couple ways that we can determine whether a client is really ready to invest? Or because sometimes we get confused, we might get like, I know I've been strung along by prospective clients before, like, hey, can we reschedule, or can I think about it, and things like that. Like, how might we handle if we're getting things like, this all sounds great, but can I think about it? Like, would you say, is that a serious client, or is there maybe another step we need to take, or what's happening there if we feel like we have to chase down clients?
Yeah, so I am not a fan of chasing down clients, but I also know, me personally, I'm not a fan of pressure sales. So I don't like, when people say you have to sign now, I'm like, okay, I just won't sign. So I let people think about it. Part of it is your follow-up. Are you reminding your client of the benefits? Hey, are you ready to do this weight loss program so you can create healthy lifestyle, have that energy, health, and vitality, and be, the parent or the grandparent that you want to be? Who else beyond you would be affected? You can paint that picture for them in the follow-up. And if they're ready, sometimes it just takes a little bit of a nudge. If people get on the calendar, they're more likely to show up. So that can be a way of kind of giving them that nudge. It is an investment in both their time, energy, and money to make this commitment. So how do we kind of vet those people? Well, part of it, I think, is really going back to explaining the benefits. When people really know what this is going to get for them or do for them, it does have the capacity to change lives. That's what we do with people. Yeah, we change habits, cravings, patterns, but we are helping people overcome some of those deeper wounds about how they see themselves or how they see the world around them. So when they really recognize that bigger impact, of course, they're more ready to move forward.
Mhm.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I love what you said about the follow-up, because I spoke to a lender last week to help finance my clients, and I thought his follow-up process was fantastic. Like, usually people follow up with like, "Hey, are you still thinking about it?" or "Hey,
Right.
just checking in," and it's very transparent.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he sent out like a long email, like, "Hey, just to recap what you're looking for and your business and your goals and who your clients are." He recapped our whole conversation, just making sure I have everything right. And feel free to touch base if you have any other questions. And I was like, wow, like I
Yeah.
feel compelled to reach back out, because there was definitely some thought on their
Right.
side. So I thought that, I love that, like
Yeah.
catching up with the value, what you do, how this can help change your life. Like, is that kind of what you're talking about, Holly?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great illustration of that.
Mhm.
So back to what you were saying before, if you feel like you have to chase down clients, you probably don't have enough clients in your funnel, right? I can't keep up with chasing clients down. If they're not ready, I'm not going to. I do send a couple follow-up emails. I want to make sure they have some resources, whether they work with me or somebody else. But probably that number one way is people just don't have enough people getting in their chair, getting in front of them to have those conversations about their commitment level to a program.
Mhm.
So I would say if you're having that experience, oh, I'm chasing after this client or this client, go back to your marketing plan and your funnel and see how are you getting people into the chair with you or into your office or your Zoom environment. How are you selling that first session? And do more of that, just up that game on those first sessions, so that, because part of it is kind of I could have a metaphor, it's a fishing game, right? Not everybody's going to be a good fit. And so it's okay to let people go if you need to let them go. But just getting that steady flow of clients then feeds your business, fills your practice, and lets you quit your day job so that you can be that full-time practitioner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, I mean, it could be just a volume issue, is
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you saying. And I think, I personally, when I find myself going into a scarcity mindset, it's usually because something like I was waiting for my ads to actually start pumping. So I
Yeah.
found that was just a sign, a signal. I was like, oh, it's really just a volume thing. If I'm leaning too forward in with someone who just doesn't seem like a good fit, it just sort of like a scarcity mindset that we might be in if we don't have a good process of bringing leads to us in whatever funnel that looks like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And speaking of getting clients, Holly, as we wrap up here, I know we're kind of out of time here, but you have a free gift for this audience to help them with their client attraction machine, whatever that looks like for you, Holly. Would you tell us what you have for this audience?
Yeah. So even seasoned hypnotists, professionals often have a hard time of keeping that flow and getting clients. And often it can feel overwhelming to market, get the word out. So marketing is simply, how do you get the word out? How do you let people know about what hypnosis is, what it can do for them? Hypnosis has certainly become an easier sale, in more recent years than when I first started 16 years ago. It was, people like hypnosis, and they'd be like, give you the eye roll or run the other way. So now it's a lot more easy to get those people in there. But looking at, there's many different ways that you can market and get the word out. And we may not want to do all of these different ways. Some might be more geared toward our own gifts, talents, and whether it's a bigger investment versus there's a lot of free ways to get the word out there as well. So what this free gift is 47 marketing checklist of these 47 strategies that you can start applying right now to get clients and to fill that funnel system, or to just keep that flow in, so that one, you're using your gifts and talents, you're working with your client base, you're covering your bills, your expenses. That money is that exchange of energy. It's also supporting you, your family, and the community. So, and letting you do what you love. So it gives you that checklist. And then I think there's also a video about how to dial in your marketing plan. So marketing doesn't have to be hard or overwhelming. It can be even 8 to 10 things that you do consistently. Just get started with 3.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I mean, and this is something we can start to use right now. Is that right, Holly?
Yeah. Well, in this checklist, you'll go through and some of them you'll like, oh yeah, I can do that one. Oh yeah, that one's easy for me. And others you might be like, oh, maybe not right now, or maybe later, or maybe it's not a good fit for your personality or for your business. So it gives you kind of a whole checklist of things that you can go through. It's better to pick 1 or 2 and really dial into those rather than, throwing spaghetti at the wall and doing a bunch of them.
I love that. So there's a whole checklist here you can choose from, sort of like a little buffet of strategies you can use right now to start bringing in clients. Okay. So go ahead, scroll below this video, click the link to go get this free gift. It's only available for 48 hours from the time this email was sent out. So if you haven't gotten it already, go get it before the link expires. Holly, I want to thank you so much for your valuable insights here today on the summit. I know I can guarantee your story and what we talked about is resonating with this audience for sure. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lydia. It's been great to chat with you.
Yeah. Scroll down, get the free gift, and I'll see you in the next interview.